Hi everyone, it's Annabelle and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're going to be repotting 3 Phalaenopsis that I got back in summer from a new nursery, and these are the Phalaenopsis floresensis, which I have here, the Phalaenopsis Schillgig, which is Schilleriana crossed with gigantea, and Phalaenopsis Princess K crossed with gigantea alba. First of all, we're going to be repotting the Phalaenopsis floresensis. These, when I first got them, I took them out of their pots immediately, soaked them in seaweed and rain mix for a few days, and then I actually let them dry out because I was in the middle of moving house and I wasn't sure when I'd next be able to get back to them. So they're dried off here in this tub. Just going to go run this one under the tap to rinse off any debris and just to increase the root flexibility and take off some of the dead root in the Phalaenopsis floresensis. The others don't really have many dead roots, but I'll just show you the root trimming process on this one at least. Just taken off the roots where the velumen, the outer coating, was brown and the inner root hair was also showing through. It clearly looked dead, and just trimmed off the end of this root here that was clearly dead, but the upstream root is alive, so I'll leave that nicely intact and I won't cut into the alive, fresh, healthy tissue. So that is that one root trimmed and washed off. So I'm just going to put it straight into a self-watering pot. I've prepped these earlier, got microfiber wicks in, and we're going to fill the bottom of the pot with leca. And then we're going to place the orchid into the pot once we've filled up to about a third of the way in the pot with leca. I'm going to be using a mixture of leca and lava rock for these guys because the lava rock increases the amount of moisture that's kept in the pot while also being a very airy medium, and the leca obviously is basically a padding agent at this point, but very well characterized. We've used leca a lot. I'm very familiar with leca, so I use it in my mixes, usually at least 50% leca with other materials, and at the moment lava rock I'm finding really helps to increase the amount of moisture retained in the pot. So I'm just filling the bottom of the pot with mostly leca that I can pick out and holding the wick up so the wick is a little bit higher in the pot. So that's the kind of level that we've got at the bottom. And then I'm going to place the orchid into the pot. I may have filled slightly too high with leca, so what we can do, you can either take some leca out or just gently push on the orchid and just squeeze the pot, and it shifts the medium around the roots to kind of allow them to settle into the root ball a little bit, and you can get the orchid a little bit down into the pot. So now that the orchid is settled at the level that I want it in the pot, I'm just going to fill around with the mixture of leca and lava rock. And with lava rock I think it's very important not to bruise any root tips because it is a rough material, so I'm just filling gently around. I'm not putting any pressure really on, I'm just kind of tapping the medium down so it fills in the root ball. And there's a little root here which has hidden under a leaf, so I'm just going to tuck that in. Having pre-soaked this a little bit to increase the flexibility of the roots means that it's easy to just tuck roots in, which is another reason that it's easier to work with wet roots rather than dry roots. Just gently filling around. I think a slotted spoon is fantastic for filling around with medium, and very invaluable, especially if you've got medium sitting soaking. It can obviously drain as you're filling. And this medium has already been washed and had several soaks in water overnight to remove any salts from the manufacturing process or natural kind of dust, salt, minerals that are accumulating in the lava rock. And then I'm just going to gently kind of push that down, and I'm happy with the kind of level it's sitting at. It's a little bit of an awkward repot because of the way the orchid was leaning in the pot, but I'm happy with that level. So we're just going to move on to the next orchid now. I've left some room at the top of each pot so that we can actually, if I need to, go back and fill around with non-porous smooth river pebbles. I'll just see how it works in my new environment though. The lava alone may be enough to stop the dry top layer. So moving on to my next pot, this time we're choosing a 15cm pot, which is an orchid focus pot, which fits perfectly into the IKEA Nedgecon outers. If you have an IKEA that stopped them, they're fantastic. They are out of stock at my IKEA though, they've stopped doing them, so I don't know if IKEA has discontinued those. It's very regional with IKEA, their ranges, so if you have an IKEA that does these are fantastic for 15cm pots for outer masks for self-watering. Just filled the bottom of the pot again, holding the wick up as I fill in, so the wick is a little bit higher in the pot. This again helps to increase the efficiency that the water is wicked to the top of the pot and the moisture level in the pot. So now I'm just going to pop my orchid in here, check that we're fitting well. Not a massive root system on this one as you can see, but we do have some branching root tips, so I do believe that this root system will survive the transition. Often if you've got energy going into new root tips or actively growing root tips on the old root system, as long as you're providing lots of light, the old root system should make it, in my experience. But everyone does have different experiences, and if you find that the old root system frequently dies off in your environment after a repot, you could do an intermediate stage where you keep the orchid a little bit drier while it acclimatizes. Personally, I feel that this is adding another layer of shock to the transition, so I go straight into full semi-hydro. I don't treat these any differently to my normal semi-hydro orchids. I just put them straight in and keep going as if they've always been in that setup. And I usually get really good results with Phalaenopsis, at least, doing it this way. So I'm just filling around with a mix of leca and lava rock, and then I will leave a little bit of a gap at the top of this pot. One is a little humidity mask, two in case I need to add in some pebbles at a later date to stop the dry top layer, but we'll just see how we go with this. And you don't want to bury the stem of the orchids, so if you've got a bit of an awkward one like this where you've got roots coming from higher up in the stem, it's probably better to pot the orchid a little bit lower and then just leave it with a gap in the medium, because you don't want to bury the stem at all. That can cause stem rot, especially with constantly moist systems like this. So I'm fairly happy with the positioning of that orchid in the pot. So that is that repot done, and just pop the tag in. That is the Phalaenopsis Princess K crossed with Gigantea alba, or repotted. And now we're going to move on to, last but not least, the Phalaenopsis Schillgig. So the Schillgig has the worst root system out of all of these, so hopefully it will take after the Schilleriana more than the Gigantea, because Giganteas are very slow growers, and to me they take a long time to adapt to semi-hydro, just in my experience. Not in terms of root die-off, just because they're very slow to grow roots, to grow anything, for me at least. But I could be not providing a hot enough environment, because they are very hot growers. They like it very hot and humid, and they have very high light requirements compared to a normal Phalaenopsis. So it could just be that I'm not meeting the needs of my Gigantea, but we'll see how this one does. It was just in a very tightly packed sphagnum moss mix, in the little nursery sleeves, so it had a little bit of moss stuck onto the roots. So I'm just trying to brush that off. Obviously it has been soaking and then it's dried, and then I will take this to the tap to really try and flush off any little bits of moss. This leaf is dying but not ready to come off just yet, so I'm going to leave it to dry up before I take it off, because obviously if there's any moisture still left in the tissue, then you can actually create a wound that can get infected. Just rinse this off at the tap to get some residues of moss off the roots. And the root system is not fantastic here, but it's better than nothing. We've got some stuff to work with. Little bits of moss stuck on, but I'm just going to leave them alone because they're not massive. And we'll just see how this does. Hopefully it'll do okay. I'm transitioning it midsummer. Should be able to get some active growth on the root tips, although there's none that are actively growing at the moment. So fingers crossed, plenty of seaweed, should be okay. We'll just have to see how we go and adapt as we go along. Got one root tip at the top, which is a newish root tip, so hopefully that one will get down without any problems, but the old root system is not looking great. You can tell an old root system looking a bit tired through the coloration and the kind of thickness of the roots. Good roots are nice, thick, green, plump roots when wet. Older roots like this, a little bit thin, a little bit straggly, not great coloration, brown and yellow in places. The yellow, obviously, coloration can be just where it hasn't been exposed to any light, for example in the centre of the roots. But if you've got roots that are in a clear pot that are looking a bit yellowish brown, they could be on their way out, but we'll leave them on because they're not out yet, and while they are on the plant, they can help the plant adapt to the new repot. I'm just going to gently squeeze to settle the medium, and then I will just leave a gap again at the top of the medium in case I need to go in and add a pebble top layer on the top. So I'm just going to add a final layer of leca and lava onto the top, and being quite careful not to bruise any root tips that are on this orchid. For orchids, particularly warmer growers in semi-hydro, you want to be aiming for a minimum of 18 degrees Celsius, although to me that's still a little bit low. I prefer to keep, especially new transitions, around 20 degrees Celsius minimums. Obviously Phalaenopsis from this particular subgenus like it a little bit warmer. There are some that'll tolerate cooler temperatures, but In general, they're warm growers, so cooler environments for semi-hydro you may run into some issues, so it's just worth bearing in mind temperature and light are quite critical, especially during the transition process. Also, waiting for actively growing root tips, especially if you're new to semi-hydro or struggling with conversions, because the new root tips will help to take over from any old roots that do die off. So that is that orchid all repotted, Phalaenopsis schilleriana crossed with gigantea or Schillgig. Beautiful, beautiful plant here. Hopefully it'll do well, and what I will do is in this same video I will include a update into the transition process so you can see how these did with these mixes, whether the dry top layer was too dry, whether I needed to add pebbles in, and then we will go in with an update. So it's been 3 months and I thought that we would update on these 3 orchids in the same video to give you some continuity as to their progression and some slight changes I've made in putting pebble top layers on. So firstly I want to explain the top layers. I did find that new roots were still desiccating when they were hitting the dry top layer despite mixing lava rock in. This is also what I found with my other repots from around this time when I just tried using lava as the top layer to increase the moisture in the pot. I still got a dry top layer and desiccating root tips, so I added in some non-porous, non-wicking pebbles, just smooth kind of river pebbles, and these just help to actually keep the moisture in the pot because they don't grab onto moisture, they're not porous, they can't suck moisture from within the pot, so they act as like an inert top layer almost. So root tips don't desiccate when they hit them, but also they can't suck moisture up from the layer below, so that layer below stays nice and moist. So first of all we'll start off with the smallest, which is the Phalaenopsis floresensis, and this is one that I found a little bit tricky to keep as a seedling, but I'm pleased to report that as an adult plant it's much easier to care for. So Phalaenopsis floresensis has been quite sensitive as a seedling in my care, so I decided to get this plant as an adult plant when I saw it come up because I really wanted to try again with it. I do have a seedling that's still alive, but it continually browns leaves and drops them, so I really wanted to try with an adult plant to see if I had any more luck or if it was just an issue with the species, and this one has done much better. If you remember, I got it in flower, and I think that does slow the progression of any orchid. I was looking at it earlier thinking I couldn't find many growing tips, but it's very recently started to reactivate. Quite a few root tips. So in general it's progressed really well in the root department and actually done really well. It hasn't grown any new leaves for me, but it is growing new roots and branching old ones, so I am very happy with its progress. Hasn't lost any of the old roots, so I think it has done pretty well for me so far, and hopefully it probably won't produce any more leaves or grow much more over winter, but hopefully next spring it'll start off some new leaves and I'll get some size progression on the leaves. But I'm pleased to say that the plant itself is adapting very well to semi-hydro and the roots are looking really good on this plant. Next we'll look at Phalaenopsis Schillgig, which is schilleriana crossed with gigantea. This is one that I was very excited to get, and it's got beautiful, beautiful leaves which are influenced by both the gigantea and the schilleriana in their kind of mottling pattern. I think they're really beautiful, silvery, beautiful pattern with some speckling on the leaves. I just think it's really stunning. This one hasn't grown any more leaves for me, but it has done pretty well in the root department. I found a few branching in the pot, so you can see there's a lot of moisture in this pot. A few roots branching off, and that's a new root that's going down, really nice fat root tip. So I'm very pleased with how this is adapting to semi-hydro. And the level of root growth we're seeing, because I did plant it in, it didn't have a massive root system and I planted it in quite a big pot, so the fact that those are at the edges of the pot already shows that it's doing very well. Schilleriana in my experience does extremely well in semi-hydro, it's a very forgiving orchid. Gigantea I have a few problems with, but luckily this seems to have taken after the schilleriana more than the gigantea in its growth pattern at least, so I'm pleased to report that this one is also doing well. Next we're going to look at Phalaenopsis Princess K crossed with Gigantea alba. So Gigantea alba colourforms are very sought after and very expensive, so any hybrids with Gigantea alba tend to be a little bit harder to get and just a little bit kind of more sought after. So I'm very excited to see how the flowers of this particular one will turn out. And I was a little bit disappointed with the root growth, but it has recently started a new leaf as well as branching old roots. That little root is branching there, there's another branch coming off below. So I think it's doing pretty well. And I was thinking I couldn't see many roots in the pot, and then I found this little guy. So, oh, and this one actually. There's one there. I think that's all, but I'm very happy with that. That obviously shows the old root system hasn't died off or new roots have got down. I don't think any new roots have actually got down yet, so I think that is from the old root system. So I think that that's doing very well. And you can see it's the only one out of the 3 that has actually started a new leaf. So I'm pleased with how that one is doing. Also, it's adapted very well to semi-hydro and it's doing very well, and it's just going to be keeping them warm over winter and providing supplemental lighting to keep this growth going if I can. But we'll see how that goes in the new environment. So the pebble top layers have really helped these, I felt. They got off to a bit of a rocky start because I wasn't sure how lacquer would actually act in my new climate, and which is why I've been trying out new things, because I'm finding that things that worked for me in my old climate aren't necessarily transferring as well, and I do definitely need the pebble top layer. I thought maybe I could get away without it because my humidity seems to be much higher, and I'm getting some kind of issues with airflow and humidity, but it turns out I still need the pebble top layer, which is great. Honestly, it's completely fixed with Phalaenopsis, my dry layer issues. There are some orchids it doesn't work for, but for Phalaenopsis and Cattleyas it's really helped me a lot. So that is my complete repot with tips into semi-hydroponics and update for my Phalaenopsis types that I got in the summer. Thank you so much for watching my video today, and if you did enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a like or subscribe to my channel for more regular orchid updates, and I'll see you guys all later. Hope you're all keeping well. Bye!